Our next inductee was known to most of us here in the room because he was one of those people who stood out, who was filled with enthusiasm and who loved skating. It was his life. In honor of the respect we all had for him, and as was the tradition while he was with us in life, we refer to him tonight, as we always did, as Mr. Rada.
Born September 13th, 1922 in Vienna, Austria, Mr. Rada was a very accomplished skater himself. He is being inducted tonight as a coach, but his competitive career is also impressive.
At the age of 15, he was the runner-up at his nationals to the current world champion at that time, Felix Kasper. Mr. Rada was also 7th in both the 1938 European and World Championships. This was such a difficult time as the world prepared for war. Sport was the last thing on most people's mind.
As war began, Austria was annexed by Germany. Mr. Rada continued to skate, but there were only a few local competitions available during that period. Such a difficult time in our history. And Mr. Rada's father made ends meet by working as a hairdresser, and the family invested in a laundry business, and maybe it was through this period that the discipline and hard work ethic was formed in Mr. Rada.
After the Second World War, Mr. Rada won a bronze medal in both the Olympic Games and the World Championships, where Dick Button was the champion and Hans Gerschwiler the silver medalist. He was known as such a good school figure skater, but also for aggressive free skating style. Here's just a short look at some of the wonderful footage of the outdoor 1948 Winter Olympics in Samoritz. There's some opening ceremony clips, little hockey game, outdoors, wood boards, and of course, our Barbara Ann Scott doing figures in sunglasses. It was a bit bright. And Eddie Rada skating just before his good friend, Dr. Helmut May.
Makes you want to skate, doesn't it, Ted?
Yeah, well,
Beautiful
I could do
setting.
that, I think, barely.
Soon after the conclusion of his competitive career, Mr. Rada joined Ice Capades for a year, but felt it was really not for him. So he accepted a job coaching at the Hamilton Skating Club. After 2 winters, he was offered a job at the Toronto Cricket Skating and Curling Club, and guess what? He turned it down. And he came out west to be close to his friend, Dr. Helmut May.
Mr. Rada joined the Vancouver Skating Club and worked there between 1953 and 1959. And as you see here, he was still in excellent skating shape as he performed at the Vancouver Skating Club 1953 Ice Carnival. There, you can see his aggressive, fast, and exciting style. Maybe the film was speeded up a little bit, but...
In 1957, he married his charming and lovely wife, Beverly, and in an interview, she said he so very much loved Vancouver and wanted to put this city on the map in the figure skating world. In September 1960, Mr. Rada moved to the newly built North Shore Winter Club, where he had quite the stable of young skaters, such as Jay Humphrey, Betty and John McKilligan, Kathy Lee Irwin, and Karen Magnuson.
Well, Mr. Rada knew he was working with talent, and knowing the old adage that work beats talent unless talent works. He used his discipline and professional strictness to get the best out of his athletes. This was not always popular, and after a trip to Europe for his visit back home, he returned to find out that Karen had changed coaches to Linda Brockman. And of course, that worked out very nicely. You see, Karen's mom, Gloria, was also quite strict.
Mrs. Rada acknowledged her husband's reputation. He was tough, she said, and not always the easiest to work with. He demanded everything you could give, as he was prepared to do the same. And I have to say, I was just doing a seminar with Jason and Karen Mongrain, and Jason brought up Mr. Rada's name, and he said, you know, I was so afraid of him that when I would do my figure lesson, he always had an alarm on his watch that was set for every 15 minutes. It would beep when the lesson was over. He said I'd find myself going around the figures with my legs shaking, and all my brain could think about was, please be a beep, please be a beep.
I was a skater during Mr. Rada's era at the North Shore Winter Club, and the male coaches of the time, Alex Fulton, Helmut May, Jack Boyle, Eddie Rada, all were incredibly professional, always wore a shirt and tie, always demanded the skaters say good morning, good afternoon, and goodbye. He demanded that the young skaters be polite and respectful to everyone. I kind of think that was a good thing.
Well, it certainly brought the best out of his skaters. Mr. Rada went on to coach many of BC and Canada's top skaters, such as Barbara Terpenning, Bruno Del Maestro, Mark Vander Kerkhoof, Cynthia Titcomb, Julie McLeod, Pat Hay, Norma Sedler, Margaret Penny, Gail Williams, and even some of our top judges, such as the wonderful Susan Heffernan and the great Sid Hughes, just to mention a few.
The passing of Mr. Rada on July 13th, 1997 was a loss for our skating community here in BC. He was a gentleman who worked hard for others to succeed. He was a patriot to our sport, and he lives in our memory, the good memory of all of us who knew him.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming into the coaching category for the Skate Canada BC Hall of Fame, Mr. Eddie Rada. Receiving the award for Mr. Rada on his behalf is his son, Marcel. Marcel?